sitting down with Virginia head coach Todd DeSorbo. You're just coming off of the ACC championships where your women's team won their 5th consecutive ACC title. Tell me about that. 5 consecutive. How are you feeling right now?
About 5 consecutive?
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. Yeah, it's great.
I'll ask you a better question. So it was not only was it your women's team's 5th straight ACC title, it was your women scored the most points ever scored by a men's or women's team at an ACC championships. You stole the record from the NC State men who just set it last year in 2023. Did your women's team have a goal going into this ACC championships? I know in the past you've spoken about wanting to score more points than you ever have as a team. Was that the goal this year, or did you have another team goal?
Yeah. So I think certainly 5 in a row is awesome. And UVA, the women's program here has won 20 total, which I think is even cooler. And obviously most of those are before I was here. So, carrying on that tradition has been really cool, and it's really impressive, and especially against the competition that we're going against. I mean, last year I think the conference had 3 top 5 teams, and so to be able to continue to try to stay at the top of a conference as competitive as ours is certainly a challenge. So it's special, and then to make it the program's 20th. Overall is pretty cool. I think anytime you hit a barrier like 5 in a row or 20 or 10 or whatever, it's really cool. It makes for a really cool ring, right? Like you can have 2 X's on top of your ring. But anyway, so we definitely had a goal, and it was really the goal was to try to score 1,500 points, which is what we scored just over 1,500 last year. And so, I think that where the team is now, and hopefully where we're heading and where we'll stay, it's going to be hard to every year try to outdo what you did the year before, right? It's going to be hard. You're going to have fluctuations in your roster, and you're going to have fluctuations in your ability to score and that kind of things. And so for us to, the last few years, it has been, hey, can we be better than last year? And certainly we want each individual. The hope is that they're better every year and they improve, and so as on an individual by individual basis, it's certainly like, hey, can you be better than you were last year? But overall as a team, we kind of just talked about starting a little bit of a 1,500 point streak. I think last year was the first year we'd ever scored over 1,500. And so I was like, hey, let's start a little streak here. Can we hit 1,500 again? And, as the meet went, we just kind of tracked that. We compared to where we were last year just as a gauge, because we did hit 1,500 last year. So like, hey, we're this many points ahead. And at one point, after a day or two, we were like 40 points behind what we scored last year. And I did a little like digging, and because I'm like, okay, why are we behind? We're swimming okay. We actually had, at that point in the meet, we'd had 4 less swims than we had the year before. And so I told the team, I'm like, we're going to be behind after tonight, but we're going to pick up 4 extra swims as the meet goes. So that should kind of catch us back up. So we kind of play a little bit of a game with it, keep it entertaining, keep it interesting, and, try to set a goal that would be challenging, but if we do well, it would be attainable.
Mm-hmm. Is 1,500, is there math behind that, or is that just a number that sounds good to you?
I think it's just a number. We 2 years ago, we scored 1,400 something. And so I think last year our big goal was, the Roman numerals for 1,500 is MD. And so that was like a big, it was all over our ACC stuff, like MD, that's the goal. And so it just kind of came about because we were just under 1,500 2 years ago, and we wanted to get to 1,500 last year. Now it's just like, all right, let's try to get a streak going, and it's like, if you score 1,500 points, then you're probably going to be in a good position to contend for the championship. And if you score 1,500 points and somebody beats you, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Because that means somebody else outdid you, and they should earn, they've earned it. So it's just kind of, I think it's gotten to a point where it's like, if you score 1,500, you're going to be in a battle to win, and it's going to be really hard for somebody to beat you if you score 1,500 points.
Yeah. Which, to give our listeners, viewers context, your women scored 1,637.5 points. So well over 1,500. But you hit the mark.
Hit the mark.
So, and obviously there's a lot of history being made by this team this past weekend. Right. So I want to talk about some of those performances. Obviously, Gretchen Walsh broke 4 NCAA records individually, plus at least one on a relay, maybe 2. I forget, honestly, but a stellar performance from her, and she's been outspoken all season about wanting to have that NC2A meet where she breaks 3 NC2A records and wins 3 NC2A titles. So to see her do this at an ACC is pretty outstanding. What did you think of her of her week overall?
Yeah, and now she's made that goal even tougher, right? Now she's made all the NCAA records faster. So if she wants to break 3 at NCAAs, she's made it harder on herself. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by any means. I would say that, she's just kind of been on fire all season, right? And she's trained that way all year, day in and day out. So, and she's raced that way, every time she steps on the block, she's like the human highlight reel, and but even before ACC. So I think that, I don't want to say that it's expected, because to go that fast and to break an NCAA record, regardless of who you are or when it is an exceptional thing to do, to be able to say that you're the fastest person ever at whatever level in whatever event is, an accomplishment that is, it's unbelievable. And so, but I wouldn't say I expected it, but I'm not surprised by it, because of what she's been doing all year. And she has been outspoken about trying to win 3 national championships and break 3 NCAA records. But her ultimate goals are bigger than what she accomplished this past week. So not surprised, really happy for her, really excited for her. And, hopefully she can do some more great things down the line, as shocking as some of it may have seemed and might have been to some, it certainly wasn't, it wasn't to us, but it's cool. But regardless, anytime you see a time like that pop up on the board, it's shocking because it's never been done. And so, so at some level, it kind of was shocking, but also it was shocking, but you're not surprised to be shocked.
When I spoke to her, she said you were the first person, as opposed to her saying 19 in a 50 free split is possible. Is that something that you were like, I think you can do this?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely believe she could do it. I don't know if it was my idea or her idea or how that. I do recall the beginning of the season, when we sat down and talked about goals for the season. She really only named 2 goals, and one of them was, and the biggest one, I think the one she was most focused on and most excited about, was going a 19 relay split. And I told her, and maybe I put it in her mind at some point that she could do it, knowing that to go 19, I told her this too. I was like, to go 19, you're probably going to have to be a 20.5 50 freestyler, right? Because we know what Gretchen's reaction is. It's always 0.7 something. So if she has a 0.1 relay exchange, then that's 0.6 off of her flat start. So she's probably going to have to be a 20.5 50 freestyler. So, but she wasn't as focused on that as much as excited about going 19, because that's cool. Like, I think to me that was her coolest swim. And to hear the crowd after the race, or after she hit the wall, it was Dressel-esque, right? Like when Dressel went 17 for the first time and the whole crowd went crazy. That's kind of what happened, and you can hear it in the video. To me, that's really cool because, I don't think that necessarily women's sports get as much hype as men's sports do. And so to have the reaction of men and women in the building, athletes, to have the reaction that she got from that swim was just, I think, really great for the sport, and also for her. And it was just a pretty cool historic moment, right? Like that moment will never happen again. And she might go 19 again, but like the first time it happens it's historic. It was unreal.
Agreed. I obviously I was not there, but I saw the video and it very much reminded me. I was there in 2013 when Vlad Morozov split 17 for the first time. I was in the crowd.
Yeah.
And it felt, it reminded me exactly of that, because that like took the breath out of the room. Everyone was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is super cool. And again, I think, like you said, it's like the coolest of the swims because it is such a barrier.
Yeah.
Perhaps the uncoolest of the swims. I thought this was hilarious that her 100 fly, she breaks an NC2A record, and like on our site, all our comments are just like, that could have been better. So I'm curious as a coach what you thought of that race.
Dude, every wall I was like, oh, I'm like every single wall, literally every turn and the finish. And she knows it. Like, I'm not saying anything that we haven't talked about. And honestly, like I was probably, as excited about that race than any, because she did break the record with literally terrible walls. And so I think any person knows if she can clean those up, she doesn't even have to do anything different. She doesn't have to swim any faster. If she just cleans her walls up, it will be faster, which is exciting, right? Because I tell our kids all the time, I'm like, if I sat you down and said, well, you've reached your full potential, there's nothing left for you to do, well, then why are you doing it anymore, right? And so it's exciting that there's more in there. Now, whether it happens or not, who knows? But yeah, we did an interview. I had to do an interview at the end of every final session for our media people. And that night they had her interview me. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions was, what'd you think about Gretchen Walsh's, she's talking about herself in the third person, Gretchen Walsh's 100 butterfly tonight. And I'm like, well, turns were a little rough, but anyway, we laugh about it. But you say uncool swim, but maybe it was the coolest swim because it was so not, I don't want to say it was poorly executed, because I think that she's still it's an event she hasn't done a ton, right? Like she swum 1,050,000 free. She swum 1,000,000 100 freestyles, a lot of 100 backstrokes, but really like short course 100 flies, she hasn't done nearly as many. So I don't want to necessarily say it was poorly executed. I just think she needs more experience with it. So, who knows if and when she'll get that, but yeah, it was still a pretty cool swim.
Agreed. Yeah, I thought it was a funny juxtaposition from the night before, I think, from a fan's perspective.
Yeah.
Of, it's like she kind of did no wrong and like set all these records the first night, and the second night it's like, oh, all right.
Yeah.
not where we had placed our expectations based on the previous night, but
yeah. Well, I and after that race, I started using her name as a term for poor turns. Like our breaststrokers. I'm like, well, you just did a Gretchen Walsh. Well, you just Gretchen Walsh that wall. I'm not sure she liked that too much, but
right. For someone who broke 4 NC2A records, it's an ironic term.
Yeah.
Your use of the.
But they're like, no, I didn't Gretchen Walsh that because I didn't break a record.
Fair enough. That's a fair argument.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then on the other side of things, you have Gretchen's sister, Alex, who sets an NC2A record in the tuner fly, splits a 20.7 on a 50 freestyle, and passes former teammate Kate Douglas for the most ACC championship titles ever of any athlete with 26. I'm just impressed by 20.7 in the 50 free for someone who's an NC2A champion in the 400 IM. Yeah. How does she have speed like that? What's going on there?
She's just, you talk about athletes with versatility, and she obviously has that, right? But she's got range and versatility, right? If she could go, well, obviously she can go sub 4 minutes in a 4 IM and can do that in a 50. She's really powerful. We definitely train her to have speed, but also have the endurance. And it's, it's a challenge to balance those two things, but she does a really good job of it. And actually I told her before the race, I was like, my number one goal for you as a coach, period, in your career is for you to go 20-point in a relay. She was like, out of all the goals, that's the biggest thing you want to see from me? I'm like, yes. And then she did it literally like 10 minutes later. It was awesome. And I think, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that out of all her swims, that was probably the most impressive too, because of her range and what she's, capable of doing in, longer races. And I told her a while ago, one of my big goals for her, I set these crazy weird goals for them, and that's something I hope that they embrace them but it's goals that are like just off the wall. So it's not like necessarily directly related to the 200 IM, which is her baby and her prime event and the event that she's would want to be most successful at. And so I try to set goals that take pressure off of those things, but help those things. So it's like Gretchen with the 50 free, like, yeah, let's shoot for 19.9.
Yeah.
It's taking pressure off, but if she's going to do that, that means her flat star 50 is going to be good too. And I talked to Alex about, like, I want you to be really fast at all 4 100s of every stroke. Like, that's my goal for you. I want you to be world-class in all 400s. And so, for example, at Knoxville, she swam a bunch of the hundreds long course. So and ultimately I think that'll help her 200 IM. But it's more about, hey, go 20-point in this 50 free. That means you're faster, you're stronger, So it was really cool to see that. I think she was probably just as happy about that as any of her races too.
Yeah. And I mean, can you tell me a little bit about preparing your athletes for a meet like this, knowing they've got NC2As on the horizon where you obviously want to be your best that you can be in yards, but they still come into this meet obviously ready to race, breaking records, a slew of best times. And also worth mentioning that for many of the athletes on your team, this is the meet, right? This is that pinnacle, but kind of balancing, preparing those athletes to have their big championship meet of the season, as well as having your NC2A athletes performing really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, and, I think historically they've done really well at ACCs. Even though it may not be our biggest focus, it is in the moment, right? Like, we had Cab Invite a couple weeks before ACCs, and I told everybody, this is our biggest meet. It's our biggest focus, and everybody swam at it. And we had some great swims there. Right. And then we move on to ACCs where, like, this may not be the meet you're trying to be your peak best at, but it is the meet that's next. And it's the meet we want to be best at. And the hope is to build off, each meet builds off of each other. Whether it's from midseason invite to the Cab Invite to ACCs to NCAAs. And I think that they just, regardless of the amount of rest or taper or shaving or all that kind of stuff, it's a championship meet. The whole team's there. It's really exciting. There's a lot of hype. There's great competition. And, usually people rise to that occasion and, want to see where we're at. And, some of them will go best times at ACCs, some won't, but we kind of always talk about, like, look, you want to be, let's just be maybe you'll go best time, but if not, let's be as close to your best times as we can. And then if you are close to your best times, then you're set up to go best times at NCAAs and you're prepared and you're going to be in a good place. And if you happen to go best times, that's great. Then you're even in a better place. It's just really trying to use each just marker in the season and each meet and stepping stone as a little bit of a catalyst or, to catapult you into the next competition and get you excited and motivated and, try to be really good.
Yeah. So switching focus to the men's team now, who finished 5th, scoring 768.5 points. Similar question of, did your men's team have a goal coming into this meet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the men, our goal was more centered around similarly, but centered around just being better than they've ever been on an individual by individual basis. Like can 100% of the guys go a best time? And out of 3 events, how close to, how many best times can we go? And just let the chips fall as they may, throughout the meet. We had some pretty bad luck. I don't know if you call it bad luck or what. Unfortunate situations the very first night we were DQ'd one of our relays. And so, but I tell the guys, I'm like, the 4 guys that swam on that relay actually swam really, really well, even though it was a disqualification. So I'm like, so don't let that take anything away from where you're at and what you're capable of this week. It's just you got unlucky. It is what it is. You all swam really great, so you're ready to go. So, I mean, the goal is pretty similar. Really for both teams. It's not necessarily for the guys, wasn't necessarily centered around a certain point total or anything like that. It was more just, let's see how many best times we can go.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, how do you feel like you measured up to that goal, and how are you feeling about their showing it at ACCs?
I mean, I would say I'm like mixed emotions about it. I think overall, I think it was pretty good. I think we had a lot of great swims. We had a lot of improvement. We had a ton of freshmen there. So it was a pretty young group. I want to say half our men's team it was their first time at ACCs. And so, one of our guys was watching the medley relays the first night, and one of our freshmen, and he was like, "Holy cow, I wasn't ready for this." It's obviously like going to junior nationals or going to your high school state meet or your club state meet is really different than stepping into a Power 5 conference championship meet for the first time. But interestingly enough, that freshman did best times, and so he did really well. But I mean, I felt like it was good. I feel like they're in a good place. I'm pretty excited about what we've got going into NCAAs. I think our relays are in a good position. We have a handful of guys that are positioned to score at NCAAs. And so I think I feel like we're in a place where we're about ready to take that next step. And over the next few years, things are going to be pretty interesting here on our men's side. So we're pretty excited about them.
Right. I mean, I'm excited about them too. Obviously, over the next couple of years, you got some exciting swimmers coming in for both classes in 24 and 25. So right now, you've got this juxtaposition of where the teams are at. Do you coach them differently, especially like in the next month, knowing that the teams are in different places? I mean, in any aspect, I guess. How you train or how you talk to them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think that's been, the situation all year, and for the last 5 years. And the women were in a much different place how long have I been here? 6, 7 years.
I was wondering that too. So thanks for
this is my 7th season. So, the women were in a different place when I started here than the men were. And so the conversations are definitely different. I think the preparations are definitely different. And the goals are definitely different. So I think yes and no. We coach them similarly, but not similarly, right? Like, I don't know that I'm coaching these guys, again, I coach for the most part the sprinters, and I don't know that I'm coaching them any, that much differently than I coached the the guys, back when I was coaching Ryan Held and Simonis Billis and that sprint group at NC State. I think it's pretty similar. If anything, I'm probably coaching the women differently. I'm definitely coaching the women differently now than I was 6-7 years ago. I think that side of it's changed. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, we're definitely, the conversations are different. The goals are different. The coaching is the same, but different. Most of the year they do a lot together. This time of year, they're not doing nearly as much together.
Mm-hmm. And is that a product of the meets being at NC2As being at different times, or just, again, kind of holistically where the teams are at?
No, I think it's more physiological based than it is where the teams are at. Like the women are going to try to hope, contend for a national championship, and the guys are going to go and contend, for a top 10 finish. I think the approach is similar from a team aspect. From that perspective, it's more from a physiological perspective, right? Like the guys are, the men and women need different things at this point in the season. And I think they need different things over the course of the season, but more specifically now than, more, they need different things now more than they did, in October, November, from a rest perspective, from a preparation perspective. They're training probably over the last, probably since winter training has been fairly, significantly different.
Gotcha.
Compared to what it was, up to that point in the season.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. What makes you say your coaching for the women has changed a lot in the last 6 or 7 years?
I think I'm just probably doing more like on the threshold sides of more aerobic stuff with them than I used to really do. I used to have, up until more recently, really probably the last 2 years, maybe, the women really doing the exact same thing as the men until we got to taper. And then it would be different. Just because the women didn't need as much rest as the men would need. But more recently, and in particular this year, and I think that probably stems from me being more long course minded and more long course focused as a coach, and keeping the goal of, performing at a high level at Olympic trials. That in my mind is the biggest goal for both our men and our women. Like that goal is bigger than anything, any NCAA record. It's bigger than any NCAA championship. Certainly we want to do all those things. But from my perspective, in the back of my mind is always what's going to help us be good at trials. And so throughout the course of the season, do they need a bunch of threshold work to pop off a great 100 free short course? No, not at all. Not even the women, not short course. But do they need to do a great long course 100 free? Yeah, I think so. And so, over the course of this season, it's been a lot of that. And so that's been ever evolving. And I did a little bit of it last year and doing more and more of it. And I think it's been paying off, again, from the women's perspective, I think they're performing well short course, but they've also performed well at whatever long course opportunities they've had over the last couple of months as well.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you had 3 athletes in Doha at the World Championships. I'm curious about your thoughts on how Claire Curzan, Kate Douglas, and Jack Aikens swam in Doha. They got a lot of medals for UVA and USA.
Yeah.
And also just how they're handling that experience now. It's like, and I feel like an 8-day long course meet might be a little different coming down and getting back into the rhythm of things than a 5-day short course meet.
Yeah. I mean, they were great. I was a little bit, I didn't know what to expect out of them, mainly because of the travel and the preparations. It wasn't like how we would normally prepare for your typical world championships, right? Like you have a 3-week long training camp and you acclimate for a certain amount of time, and then you go and you race, and you're like, the situation's, I don't know if the situation's ever perfect, but a little bit more perfect in a standard world championship scenario. And it wasn't like they left, they got there on Tuesday, they started racing on Sunday. Right. And so it wasn't a lot of time. So I didn't really know what to expect. But pleasantly, surprised. I mean, they did fantastic. I think they struggled a lot with adjusting and acclimating to the time. And, at one point, Kate was like, yeah, I'm still not sleeping, like 4 days into the meet. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. But, so I'm pretty proud of their resilience in order to be able to go and perform at a high level without the perfect, scenario. And we knew it wasn't going to be perfect. And that's fine, right? It's an experience. So anyway, I thought they did great. I was really happy with how they all did. And I think a lot of their races, again, pleasantly surprised, definitely some unexpected successes there. So it was really good. And coming back, I mean, yeah, it's very different, right, than a coming back from a conference championship meet, particularly the fact that they're coming back all the way from the other side of the world and then got to readjust the time. Whereas we just drove 3 hours from Greensboro and we're in the same time zone. So they were pretty low key last week. It actually works out really well because they got back midweek while we were all gone to ACCs, right? And all of our coaches were gone. And so, it was an opportunity for them to just kind of like decompress, recover. I sent some workouts back home for them to just do on their own at whatever time of day they wanted to do it, get back in the weight room, slowly get a session or two in, just kind of to ease back in, but really just use the entire week to just recover. Claire went home, spent time with her family at home, and, spent the week back home in Raleigh, and swam a little bit, with TAC, I think, when she was there. But, it timing wise worked out really well from that perspective, because now we're back and, we're back with the NCAA team and they're back in, and they can kind of, they regrouped and recovered and they're ready to go and excited. So that week, it was nice because it was like we were almost forced into not doing a whole lot. And Kate's like, can you send me workouts for Wednesday through Saturday? I'm like, you're not swimming on Wednesday. I'm not sending you a workout. No swimming on Wednesday. You can get back in Thursday. So it was good, because I think if we'd have been here and they would have been here, everybody would have been itching to go. So I think it was it just worked out. The timing worked out great.
Yeah. Well, that is great. So now you've got a few weeks before NC2As. What's on the docket? What are you doing, Todd?
I'm sitting having coffee with my dog. No, we're back at it. We try to give them a little bit, because again, I think coming off of a 5-day meet is a little bit different than coming off of a 4-day meet as well. There's a lot of emotion. Physically, I'm sure they're fine, but they put a lot of emotion into it. It's really exciting. They're putting a lot of emotion and supporting in their teammates, and so it's a lot. So we chill for a few days. We gave them off yesterday. They just lifted weights. That's all they did on Monday. Today they're just going to swim, and it's going to be pretty easy. And then tomorrow we'll start cranking it back up and getting ready. So just back at it. I think that the team is, both the men and the women are feeling really good. Like those who are going to be going to NCAAs are feeling really good about what they accomplished at ACCs, and it's given them some confidence, knowing that what we're doing is working, and, let's go back to work. And I think they're all really excited about what the potential is, at NCAAs.
Well, Todd, you've given us a lot of great insight into the UVA way, but I want to take a minute to recognize the biggest news coming out of this interview, which is that neither you or I have any facial hair right now.
Yeah, is that a good thing?
I don't know. It's just surprising.
I know. I'm debating bringing the mustache back. I think it's fitting for Paris. What do you think?
That's a good point, but it would have to be like a thin mustache.
Yeah, we'll see. Actually, it's funny you say that, because I actually talked to my wife this morning about it before I left the house. I was like, I only need probably a solid 2 months before we leave to get a good one going. Like, should I do it? You know, and she's always been the one that's like, get rid of that thing. So we'll see.
Girls,
what are you gonna do?
They don't get it.
Are you coming back with yours?
I never have a plan really.
Yeah.
It's, it grows back naturally, and shaving my face to me is such a task normally. So it's like, this will only be here for a couple days, and then it's like, but I've tried growing my beard back a couple times in the last couple years, and it gets too frustrating, and then I shave it off.
Yeah.
So I'm too vain. I want people to see my face.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice face.
Thanks, Todd. All right. Well, thank you again for taking the time to sit down and chat. I appreciate all the insight, and congrats again on a great week in Greensboro.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good talking to you, man.
You've been listening to the Swim Swam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take Swim Swam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.